It's my pleasure to introduce Larry Sampler, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator. Of course, the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Afghanistan and Pakistan Affairs. It is Alex Thier, and the Administrator for USAID is Rajiv Shah. And so Larry is really the kind of the third most relevant person for Afghanistan, Pakistan affairs in the USAID. He has been out in the private sector, but he has been serving as the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Office of Afghanistan and Pakistan Affairs since 2010, 2011. And he was with CAI, Creative Associates, which many of you know is a major player on the international scene, with USAID support as well. He has substantial other experience in conflict and post-conflict environments, working for USAID, the U.S. Department of State, Institute for Defense Analysis, the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, and the OSCE in Europe, in Bosnia, Herzegovina during some difficult times. For his work with the Afghan Constitutional Lawyer Jirga and the Afghan Emergency Lawyer Jirga in 2002, President Karzai awarded him the Constitutional Medal. Larry has served in the U.S. Army and has been attached to different units, the 5th, 10th, and 11th Special Forces groups. And a number of other civil affairs, and then civil affairs battalion and civil affairs brigade. So as a special forces operative in Afghanistan, and I believe Iraq as well, Larry brings a unique perspective to his work, and I think you'll fully understand that when you listen to him speak. Larry, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I do recognize that I'm the last speaker before lunch. I wind up in this position fairly often. I will be brief, but Congressman, Chairman, thank you very much for letting me come today. I really do. I hope we'll be able to persuade you that I appreciate very much the opportunity to talk to a group like this. I usually focus on an empty chair. I did a similar speech to this in Dubai, and I have to say Clint Eastwood has stolen my thunder. I used to pull a chair up on stage, and I can't do that anymore because people think I'm going to do the Clint Eastwood and talk to the chair thing. But kidding aside, after thanking you for your focus and your commitment to Afghanistan, it's useful to me to focus on thanking the people who are no longer with us. The Afghan civil and military martyrs, the Americans, the Germans, the Brits, the internationals who are no longer able to participate, but who have actually paid the price for the work that we're about to do. That helps to keep me humble, and it helps, I think, to keep me focused as well, because this isn't always easy work to do. I'm going to talk about 3 things, and then I'm going to end with 2 challenges for the group. And then I'll stick around for a little bit for questions. But before I even start, Dave Marston, will you raise your hand? Dave manages public-private investment issues and interests for USAID, and I hope that if you have questions or things you want us to be aware of, that you'll take advantage of his continued presence here during the course of the day. What I'm going to talk about is what we've done in the past and how we did it, what USAID is currently trying to do in Afghanistan, and how we expect to work in Afghanistan going forward. With respect to the past, I represent and recognize that I know next to nothing about Afghanistan compared to the people here, but since 2002, it's been a large part of my life, and so I'll talk about the beginnings of my engagement with Afghanistan in 2002 very briefly. When I got there, and to put this in a context that some new friends I've made today can perhaps recognize, Qasim Taran with respect to IT issues, Hassan Nouri with respect to engineering issues that we talked about before this, and then Tor Baderi with respect to property issues. In 2002, when I showed up in Afghanistan, there was no IT capacity. There was no internet availability. We had phones, that some of you may remember, that were issued by the United Nations, these big ugly yellow bricks that would only talk to other ugly yellow bricks, but that was the telecommunications system we had at the time. With respect to engineering, there was a lot of things that were still there, but not a lot of things that still worked. You were lucky if you got a house that had a heating system with a ventilation system that worked. The number of colleagues that we've all probably lost to asphyxiation is a testament to the importance of basic engineering. In 2002, those things weren't there. I was very fortunate to move into the room of a home of a very gracious Afghan family who introduced me coincidentally to the best meals and the worst toilets I've ever seen in my life. But that was what property management was you met someone and they took you to their home and they graciously invited you in. Now in your mind, jump forward to today, to the information technology that is available, and not available from internationals, but from Afghans. When I need my computer fixed now in Kabul, I can go to an Afghan, and she or he will be able to do things that I can't even begin to understand. With respect to engineering, Afghanistan is very quickly becoming very adept, not just at identifying engineering requirements, but maintaining. I think the comments made earlier about infrastructure is not a today thing. Infrastructure is a decades-long investment, and you have to maintain it. And I'm pleased to see within the ministries and within Afghanistan society an appreciation for the maintenance of the infrastructure and the engineering they have. And their property values in Afghanistan rival Washington. When I go back and have to negotiate leases for some of our partners or look at leases that our partners have submitted, I'm astounded at how savvy the Afghan market is. But going back to 2002, that year USAID invested about $500 million in the year 2002. By 2010, the investment was around $13 billion. In addition to the change in dollar value, there's a change in the investment mindset. We came to Afghanistan with very traditional development models in mind. And we found a country that was so devastated from decades of war that traditional development worked. There were so many opportunities to fix things, to feed people, to take care of people, that it was easy to do traditional development in Afghanistan and show a quick response or a quick effect for those dollars. We started in Kabul first and then moved out to other population centers. Donors began focusing on humanitarian assistance needs, but then moved on to other things. And let me just hit some of the highlights, because I think so much of what you hear in Washington and in the United States is pessimistic or is focused on the negatives in Afghanistan. But Afghan partners, with the support of USAID and other donors, from 2002 to 2010, life expectancy in Afghanistan increased by about 20 years, from around 44 to 60 some odd years, depending on male or female. That's tremendous in developmental scales. Infant mortality was reduced from 172 deaths per 1,000 births to well under 100, almost a 50% reduction. And maternal mortality was reduced from 16 deaths per 1,000 to around 3. And again, that's a remarkable achievement in development settings, partly because things were so dire in Afghanistan, it made it easy to show remarkable gains. We've seen functioning primary health care facilities increase from under 500 basic clinics to almost 2,000 in 2010. And that means now that Afghans have basic health services within an hour's walk in over 66% of the cases. So 66% of your citizens in Afghanistan can now walk to a clinic and get medical assistance within an hour. In schools and education, which I particularly think is important. In 2002, there were less than 900,000 students in school. By 2010, that number was 7.8 million, and importantly, almost 40% of those students are women. So our programs back then were large, they were broad in focus, we would call them quick impact. You can jump in, you can do things, you can show an immediate response. Capacity building was a thought, but it was not the primary focus. The primary focus was fix something now, and we did a lot of that. So talking about what we've been doing more recently, from maybe 2005 or 2006 onward, we began to recognize that now we have to build the Afghan capacity. I was fortunate enough to participate as a support member of the emergency law jargon, and the progress we made from the ELJ to the constitutional jargon was enormous. I was also fortunate in 2010 to go back and work for now Ambassador Hakimi on the Kabul conference. And the progress they had made from the Constitutional Jury of Kabul Conference was enormous. And it didn't reflect brilliance on the part of the international community in terms of how we came in and built this capacity. It reflected an Afghan youth and an Afghan society that was like a sponge, and it would absorb every bit of learning and every bit of learning from example that they could. So that by 2010, there was tremendous capacity in the individuals. One of the things that I think we're still lacking in Afghanistan, and I mean we, the international community with our Afghan colleagues, is while individual capacity has been a tremendous focus, institutional capacity is still lacking. And going forward, I think that's going to be something too that we continue to focus on. But for the moment now, our funding is expected to be flat. I'm here to tell you, and it's a public statement that the Secretary and even President Obama have made, we are not walking away from Afghanistan. We are not leaving Afghanistan. There will be perturbations, there will be changes in the kinds of things we do with and for Afghanistan, but we are there for the long haul. It tickles me when I hear general officers in the military talk about the enduring presence in Afghanistan. And for our military, that's something that they measure in months or in maybe a couple of years. For USAID, an enduring presence in Afghanistan is measured in decades. And the situation permitting, we will be in Afghanistan for decades. And I'll be one of those tourists who walks the Wahan corridor and who rafts the Panjshir River and who gets to come back years from now and enjoy the fruits of our labors. So now we're focusing on capacity building. We're focusing in the transitional years for the next couple of years in what we call transition. And President Karzai has articulated a phrase, the transformational decade. We intend to be part of that and to support that. But what does that mean in terms of real world, what do we do on the ground? Aid is broken. As a government agency, we have to work in bumper stickers because we have to be able to explain what we do to people. And we're focusing on kind of 4 pillars of our transition. One is results. We have to be able to satisfy Congress that the tax dollars they've given us are being spent on things that produce results. We have to be able to persuade Ashraf Ghani that the tax dollars we're spending in Afghanistan are producing results. And one of the greatest contributions I think that Dr. Ghani makes is he is a very aggressive overseer of the efficiency of mechanisms in Afghanistan. So we're going to renew and reinvigorate our focus on producing results. We're focusing on partnership. If the government of Afghanistan and the civil society of Afghanistan don't want a project, we have no business doing it. We are not trying to create another little America in Afghanistan. We are trying to support the sovereign government of Afghanistan as they build their capacity. So these things have to be done in partnership, and we recognize that. That's reflected in what we now have. We have quarterly portfolio reviews in Kabul with the relevant ministries, where our mission director, Ken Yamashita, sits across from the minister or the deputy minister and opens our books to him and says, these are the programs that we're doing relevant to your ministry. And I attend some of these, and it's increasingly reassuring when the ministry is sometimes more familiar with the programs than even the mission director is, because our staff at the working level with the ministry staff at the working level have prepared for the meeting in a way that 10 years ago we couldn't have done. So the point here is, as the ministry's capacity has risen, not the minister's capacity, but the ministry's institutional capacity, as that grows, we're able to push more and more of the day-to-day work of these programs over to them. So that was it. Results, partnership, sustainability, and accountability are the last 2 pillars. Sustainability is important. I've talked each visit with the Ministry of Public Works about what are they able to do to maintain these roads that have been built throughout Afghanistan. I'm from rural North Georgia, and there are parts of Afghanistan where you now have road systems that are better than ours. There are parts of Afghanistan now where goods get to market. It never got to market before because the roads and the networks didn't exist. That infrastructure has to be sustained. There's I use in talking to other bureaus and talking to other USAID missions around the world, the work that your DABS is doing with respect to maintaining your power system, collecting revenues for the electricity you distribute. That's sustainability, and I think your colleagues in Afghanistan are setting examples in that regard. And then accountability. Accountability for us is something that's, again, very important. We have the Special Inspectors General for Afghanistan Reconstruction and General Fields. I'm a huge fan of the work that he did and that his successors have done. But we also have the Government Accounting Office and individual members of Congress who quite rightly are focused on accountability. So that will continue to be an important part of what we do. I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to wrap up by talking about something from a slightly different part of the world. T.E. Lawrence, when he was working in the Arab countries, had a quote that people in the development community tend to use quite often. And the quote is, "Better that they should do it imperfectly themselves than you do it perfectly for them." And in development circles, that's almost a mantra. It's hard to do, especially for Americans. It's hard for us to see things done less optimally or less than perfectly, especially when we know we can pitch in and do it for them. We're, though, in Afghanistan at a balancing point where I think we've just tipped from doing it for them to recognizing T.E. Lawrence's admonition. It's better that we let the Afghans do these things in ways that aren't maybe quite as good as if we had had GTZ from Germany doing it, or the project might not be, the bookkeeping not be quite as tight as if we had had KPMG come in and do the bookkeeping for one of our big development contractors. We're tipping in the direction of T.E. Lawrence's admonition, but we're restrained by the oversight and the requirements that we have to satisfy the Congress and the IGs and the inspectors. So balancing that is going to be a challenge in the years coming forward, especially as we move deeper and deeper into transition and deeper into your transformational decade. So then I said I'm going to finish with two challenges. One, and I think I'm actually quoting General Fields from the conference in Dubai, or not quoting, but I'm going to paraphrase, and please correct me, sir, if I'm wrong. But I was struck by what I wrote down in my notes then as a virtuous cycle. You can have no governance without military and civil service, without an infrastructure, and you can't have the military and the civil service without revenues. There can be no government revenues without prosperity, and there can be no prosperity without good, reliable governance. Now, that cycle is one that I think is important in all the work that USAID does around the world, but it's especially important right now in Afghanistan as you try to grow this country out of the problems of the past. And I'm charging you as members of the business community who have contacts in government and in the diaspora and back in Afghanistan to keep the pressure on your colleagues. That cycle requires constant upkeep. I'm a physicist. It requires an infusion of energy to keep that cycle moving. Governance requires a civil society and a civil service, which requires revenues, which requires good governance to be able to generate the prosperity needed. The second charge is this one, and in this case I'm quoting from one of Doug Brooks' events in Washington last year, where Jim Bullion, and you should all get to know Jim if you don't, the U.S. Task Force for Business and Stabilization Operations. And his comment was, let's focus on getting Afghanistan off the front pages and onto the business pages around the world. To do that, you are central to that. So I would encourage you, talk to TFBSO, talk to the members of your board, continue the networking that I've done so well in Dubai and here. And as necessary and possible, please include USAID in your questions, your thoughts, and your plans. But thank you very much again for having me.